Today,
I
we're going to
hope the
dive
coffee
into what
machine is
could be
working.
a real paradigm shift in how we manage
What's
our
happening?
post-TAVR patients. We're breaking down a fascinating prospective study from the European Heart Journal, Digital Health. It looks at how a novel acoustic biomarker, something measured by a simple wearable device, might give us a brand new and much-needed window into left ventricular remodeling.
So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the big picture, the gap we all face in heart failure monitoring. Then we'll zero in on the specific challenges we see in our TAVR patients. After that, we'll introduce the really cool acoustic biomarker at the center of this study, dig into the key results, and then wrap up by thinking about what a future with this kind of functional monitoring could really look like in our day-to-day practice.
All right, so let's set the stage. We all know that managing heart failure is a constant battle. A huge part of that challenge is our desperate need for better, more continuous tools to monitor these patients and hopefully get ahead of decompensation before it happens. And look, this isn't just a feeling we have in the clinic. It is a well-documented, widely recognized gap. A major systematic review by Butler and his colleagues really drives this home. It basically confirms that our current approach, which is often reactive and triggered by readmissions, it's just not cutting it. The field is crying out for tools that can move us from being reactive to being proactive and even predictive.
This is exactly where something like cardiac acoustic biomarkers, or CABs, could come in. What are they? Well, in short, they're non-invasive measures that cleverly synchronize heart sounds with ECG data. The idea is to create a kind of digital signature of the heart's electromechanical function, one that we can track remotely over time to potentially, finally, fill that critical monitoring gap.
Okay, so with that bigger picture in mind, let's really narrow our focus to the post-TAVR population, because this is a group where that monitoring gap feels especially wide. Once we've successfully deployed the valve, the really critical question isn't about the valve anymore. It's about the muscle. How is the ventricle actually recovering? As we all see every day, severe aortic stenosis creates this chronic pressure overload, which leads to LVH. And while it starts as an adaptation, it eventually becomes maladaptive and problematic. So the whole point of TAVR really is to relieve that afterload and give the myocardium a chance to reverse remodel. And tracking that process is absolutely key to getting good long-term outcomes.
Of course, our current gold standard is the transthoracic echo. It's indispensable, no question. But we all know its limitations, right? It's operator-dependent, there can be access issues, and maybe most importantly, it gives us these infrequent, static snapshots. It just doesn't capture the dynamic, day-in, day-out heming process that's actually happening in the myocardium.
And this brings us right to the heart of the Lee et al. Study. They investigated a specific wearable device that measures a very particular acoustic biomarker designed to track these very changes.
So what is this biomarker? It's called Electromechanical Activation Time, or EMAT. It measures the time from the Q wave on the ECG to the first heart sound. But the real physiological insight here is that this interval is a fantastic proxy for the isovolumic contraction time. And as we know, that phase of the cardiac cycle is incredibly sensitive to changes in both afterload and contractility. It's a really smart target.
And the workflow itself is designed to be dead simple. A patient uses a simple patch, it captures the ECG and phonocardiogram data, sends it through their phone to the cloud, and that's it. The whole measurement takes less than a minute. Suddenly, high-frequency remote monitoring actually seems feasible in the real world.
All right, so let's get to the good stuff. The core findings from this prospective study. What actually happened when they applied this technology to real TAVR patients?
The study was a good size. They followed 159 patients with severe, symptomatic AS, all of whom got a TAVR and completed a full year of follow-up. So this gives us a really solid data set to look at.
Now, if you look at their baseline characteristics, it's a pretty typical TAVR population. But here's the number I want you to focus on, that bottom line. Over half of them, 55.3%, had severe LV hypertrophy before they even got to the cath lab. So this was a group with some serious underlying myocardial disease. So finding number one, and this is a big one, the study found a direct link between this functional acoustic biomarker and the anatomical reality from echo. The heart rate corrected EMAT, which they call EMAT%, showed a strong and statistically significant correlation with LVIM.
And as you can see from this chart, that wasn't just a one-time thing. That correlation was remarkably consistent and strong over the entire year. An R value of 0.58 at baseline and still 0.59 at the 12-month follow-up.
That tells you this biomarker is reliably tracking what's happening to the anatomy. Okay, so the second key finding takes it a step further. It's not just about correlation, it's about diagnostic power. The data show that EMAT percent isn't just related to LVH, it's actually highly accurate in identifying it. It's essentially acting as a functional surrogate for a critical anatomical finding.
So, how accurate are we talking? Well, the area under the curve at 12 months was an impressive 0.858. An AUC over 0.8 is generally considered excellent. This confirms that this simple, non-invasive measurement has some serious diagnostic punch.
Now, this timeline tells a really powerful story. It shows the actual reverse remodeling happening in these patients. Just look at that dramatic drop in severe LVH, from 55% at baseline, plummeting down to just 19% at 1 year. This is exactly the physiological healing we're hoping to see.
And here's the real clincher. This data shows that the EMAT percent value tracked this anatomical improvement almost perfectly. As the median LVMI came down from 142 to 111, the median EMAT percent shortened in lockstep, from over 10% down to 8.76. The functional biomarker perfectly mirrored the structural change. It's really compelling.
So let's step back. What are the big picture clinical implications here? How could a tool like this really change our approach from just doing a valve procedure to truly managing the myocardium over a patient's lifetime? The core idea here is a fundamental shift in perspective. It's about moving away from relying only on those infrequent, static anatomical snapshots we get from echo and moving toward a continuous, dynamic understanding of the heart's functional recovery.
You can almost envision a clinical framework for this, right? Before the procedure, you establish a patient's baseline signature. Right after TAVR, maybe even in the hospital, a big drop in EMAT could confirm procedural success. And then, for the long haul, you track each patient's own healing curve to spot those who aren't responding as well much earlier than we can now. The authors of the study really summed it up perfectly. This kind of tech allows us to shift our focus from just the valve intervention itself to the real long-term goal, improving and managing the health of the myocardium for the rest of that patient's life.
And that really leaves us with the provocative question for our field. As TAVR moves into younger, lower-risk patients who we expect to live for decades, is this kind of continuous functional data going to become essential? Could it become the new standard for what we call true lifetime patient management? It's certainly a compelling future to think about.